me one moment. So as Jen said, my name is Gail Schwartz. I'm with the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania, and today's webinar is a continuation of the conversation that we had back in July. Let's see, let me get the presentation started. Share my screen. Thank you for your patience. So with that, I would like to see who all is with us today. Jen, if we could run the poll, please just select the category you most closely identify with. I think we all wear many different hats, but what is the hat that is going to benefit most from the presentation that we are going to have today, the discussion that we are going to have today? So we'll keep this open for about another 15 seconds, and then we'll see who all is with. A lot of housing locators and navigators on the cards, as well as community groups, tenant advocates, so forth. And yeah, it looks like we have a whole lot of housing locators, housing case managers, as well as mainstream services. All right. So for today's agenda, we're just going to go over some highlights from the first part of the summit. Then we're going to get into landlord engagement post-pandemic, where we are going to learn about landlord engagement initiatives that are happening in central Pennsylvania, in Montgomery County, in Bucks County, and out in the Lehigh Valley. And then we're going to end our event today by going into breakout rooms. So that means that today's summit is going to run a little bit differently. The first half of this event is going to be recorded, but when we do go to our breakout rooms, those rooms are going to have open discussion and they will not be recorded. Because we do have the discussion breakout rooms, we are not going to be taking Q&A during the first half of today's presentation. So please grab a piece of paper and write down any questions and bring those questions to the breakout room discussions. As always, recording and slides will be shared after today's presentation. So let's get into the highlights of the first part of the summit that happened back in July. So the one thing that we want to really stress is with any collaboration, you want to start from a place where your interests and needs align. And so when it comes to landlords and clients, as well as housers, our common ground is, everybody wants rent paid on time. We want people to be able to maintain the home. Landlords want that. Clients, want to be able to take care of their home. Of course, providers are always working with folks to do that. And, just generally being a good neighbor and integrating into the community. We then talked about, what are housing locator challenges? And so a lot of this information we got collected through housing locator surveys. So we know that housing locators are having trouble finding landlords as well as maintaining the landlords that they had. That the two biggest barriers to overcome for the clients that they're trying to rehouse is past evictions and having no income. The number one reason that they are hearing that landlords no longer want to work with programs is that they're feeling burned. And not just burned by tenants, but also burned by agencies. Those that don't report using any additional financial incentives are disproportionately found based in rural areas. And then those that are successful in landlord engagement, despite a rapidly tightening rental market, is that they're starting to use kind of these front-end financial incentives, things like vacancy payments, sign-on bonuses, in addition to some of the strategies that were used before, like landlord risk mitigation funds. We also have surveyed and talked to landlords. Landlords are telling us their common challenges are tenant management issues, meeting their financial obligations, and keeping up with repairs and maintenance. They also shared with us some of the barriers that they are unwilling to overlook, even with case management and rental assistance, is past eviction, no income, and a history of violent crime. But we did also talk to them about what are the preferred incentives that they are that would persuade them in working with tenants who are involved in case management and rental assistance programs. And so risk mitigation funds still come up pretty high, right? Making sure that if damages happen, that there's assistance to pay for it. Generally, in making sure that the payment standards are in line with what the market is offering them, so increasing those payment standards. Also seeing, can we do automatic rent increases? And then also looking at repair funds for just helping ensure that units are up to code, vacancy payments, increased security deposits, and then also having that housing navigator, housing landlord, housing locator, or landlord liaison, that single point of contact to go to with their concerns and needs. And then what type of landlord is most willing to overlook screening criteria with their top choice incentives? And we found that landlords that are managing and operating less than 100 units are more likely to waive some of their tenant screening criteria if there's case management and rental assistance involved. We found that, in fact, 80% of landlords who are operating up to 100 units said that they would be willing to overlook at least one of their screenings. So landlord engagement initiatives really have two strong key components that, when combined, they really make for a well-rounded landlord engagement initiative. And that first one is customer service. These incentives are meant to make it easier for landlords to work with the agency that is providing the tenant-based subsidy, as well as recruitment to the program and retention to the program. And then there are those financial incentives that are meant to address an immediate financial concern or need of the landlord to ensure that landlords are going to start working with or continue to work with tenant-based subsidy programs. So with that, I have another Zoom poll for you all, and we want to know, for those of you joining us today, what type of landlord incentives are you currently offering? Do you have a housing navigator, landlord liaisons on staff? Do you have a customer service incentive like a landlord website or portal to, help learn more about your program, as well as, track payments and maybe uploading necessary paperwork, education classes, landlord forums? Those are also customer service incentives. There are the financial incentives like risk or damage mitigation funds, enhanced security deposits, again, all around, if something gets damaged, who's going to pay for it, repair fund to help preserve or increase housing quality, recruitment or retention bonuses. Sometimes these are called sign-on bonuses, vacancy or hold payments, just a little bit of money to make sure that the landlord will keep the unit and, open to just clients of your particular program or community homelessness service center? Or, are you in a situation where you're not able to access any of these? So we'll keep it open for about another 10 seconds. All right, do we want to share the results? Yeah, we see a lot of folks are working with housing navigators. We see a lot of people are doing some sort of risk or damage mitigation. And there's still a fair amount of folks that don't have any sort of incentive going on, but we also are seeing, more people use recruitment and retention bonuses and vacancy hold payments. So that's really great to see. And then with that, let's get into the new information, the more exciting information, looking at different landlord incentives that are happening around, or landlord engagement initiatives that are happening around the state, as well as different types of incentives. So our first speaker up is Laura Mazzarini from the Veterans Multi-Service Center.
Thanks, Gail. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for being here today. I am the SSVF program manager with Veterans Multi-Service Center. I work out of what I call our central Pennsylvania region, but Veterans Multi-Service Center serves everything, not everything, but boy, I'd love that. We serve counties from about the middle of the state towards the east over towards Philadelphia, and including southern New Jersey and all of Delaware. So we've got a pretty wide span and a varied clientele and location base. The type of landlord incentive or engagement program that we have really is, as it's been mentioned, is it's often called a barrier removal incentive. I like to think of it a lot of times as more like a barrier minimization incentive. I wish we could completely remove our barriers that we face with our participants, but we all know we can't really do that right off the bat. Some we can, some we can't. So looking at what our type of engagement is, as you see, what we're trying to do is get from that top line that includes trying to work around all of those barriers to a more straight line, need to housing. And to do this, one of the great things is the SSVF, or Supportive Services for Veteran Families program, which is a federal grant administered through the VA. What we can do is provide a one-time financial incentive to the landlord for up to 2 times a single month's rent. Those of you who are like me and are math challenged, the way that's worded becomes a little bit of a mouthful and I stumble on it. The great thing is that the VA recognized the change in the rental market post-COVID, and it has responded by allowing this type of financial incentive that it's not guaranteed to every participant, but it can be used when necessary. So one of the things that we look to is exactly what type of barriers are we trying to minimize. Gail, can you move that to the next slide? Not quite sure how to do that myself. Wonderful, thank you. So what these financial incentives are really looking at are, what are those very common, very high-end barriers for our clients? As you can see, this is an example of prioritizing how that incentive, when offered, can be used. And each grantee really has that ability to look at how they're going to prioritize using the incentive when it's used. And this is one example. Sex offender status, I'm sure many of you have experienced how much of a barrier that is. and how limited the housing options are. So this particular matrix that we're looking at is one where if that's really a barrier and we're finding that no housing is really more readily available, that landlord can be offered 100% of 2 times 1 month's rent and say, hey, Ms. Landlord, hey, Mr. Landlord, we understand that you're taking a risk, and we'd love you to look to us to allow this particular tenant, and we can offer this amount of incentive. The great thing is that particular incentive to the landlord goes to the landlord. It is however they choose to use that. It is not tied to a security deposit or paying rent. It is them to use. So that's a nice thing. They know it doesn't have to go into the escrow account for the security deposit. And you'll see what we've done in this metrics is kind of go down that barrier, and the lower the amount is because the barrier may not be as significant. So criminal history, I think we've all had the experience of multiple evictions or bad credit being something that the landlord's trying to say, this person may be a little bit of a risk, as well as looking at those landlords and saying, if you've overlooked these before and you're continuing to allow our participants to stay in one of your units, we may look to provide incentive to say, hey, you're really helping out our clientele. We would really appreciate that to continue, and here is some of that incentive. A new landlord who's very weary of working with a program, maybe we can provide a portion of the incentive. So that's one of the things that we're finding really, really useful. In addition, we have the housing coordinators and the case managers who really serve as that liaison between the tenant and the landlord to kind of help that potentially difficult relationship to be built. The nice thing that we're seeing is our higher barrier participants are being housed faster. And that's really what it gets down to in the end. That's how we get to that straight line. We get from difficult housing because of barriers to working with landlords to say, hey, we know that these barriers exist, but here's what we can do in addition. And we get to that straight line at the end, point B, participant housed more quickly. And I probably made that a little bit more complicated than it needed to be. I get a little tongue-tied sometimes, so I appreciate everything. And we'll be handing it over now and now, of course, I can't think of the name. I'm so sorry. Michaela.
Good morning, everybody. I am Michaela Lamford. I am the program manager at Your Way Home Montgomery County, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our sort of landlord engagement and incentive policies here in the county. And before I get into that, I do want to acknowledge that I don't actually do landlord engagement myself. And that is all done by our housing locators who are employed by some of our partner agencies. And I know at least one of them is here today, so I don't want to do any of this without acknowledging the people who do the feet on the ground work and gave me a lot of the really helpful information I'm going to be sharing with you today. So getting that out of the way at the beginning here, acknowledging the people who need to be acknowledged. Gail, if you want to go to the next slide. So for even more background than what is on my slide here, Your Way Home is sort of a umbrella agency that is sort of a unifying direction, and we are a public-private partnership, and we unite all of the housing and homeless services programming in Montgomery County. So what I'm going to talk about today is what we do for different programmings from different agencies all throughout the county. So for background, like I said, our landlord engagement isn't done by our administrative staff at my office, but by our housing locators who work for our nonprofit providers. We use a flexible philanthropic funding, which is primarily what is used for our landlord engagement efforts. We don't have any dedicated landlord engagement funding currently. We do have a little bit that we're working to get. We've applied for FAIR for this and things of that sort, but as of right now, it's mostly done through philanthropic funding, which is sort of managed by a fiscal sponsor, which is that private side of our public-private partnership. And then our administrative staff, the team here at my office, we have started conducting an annual landlord survey to all of the landlords in the county to sort of get a better understanding of their needs and their motivations and what would help them want to rent to our clients more regularly and what would help them feel more secure in participating in our programming. Gail, can you go to the next slide, please? So, like I said, we are unifying agency. So all Your Way Home rental assistance programmings abide by these same landlord incentive policies. So they are eligible to get damage payments that does not exceed the amount of a security deposit, any kind of unpaid rent reimbursement. So if you have a tenant living with you who's supposed to pay you $300 a month in rent and they don't, we could potentially make up for that. And what we're here to talk about today is a maximum of 1 month payment or a hold if you agree to work with our program while we wait for things like an inspection and for your tenant to get you documentation, IDs, things of that sort. So we can basically give our landlord a little bit of money to be like, we like that you want to work with us. Here's a tiny bit of money to encourage you to do that again. And again, this is all based on philanthropic funding, so there's not often an exorbitant amount of money to be used, but our housing locators and our provider agencies have really solid policies on when they give that money and sort of how to make it go as far as it needs to. Gail, do you want to go to the next slide? So holding fees seem to be one of the most helpful things that we do. So they can be used to help, one of our locators told me it helps them save the leasing process. So if they have any landlords who might be becoming disinterested or maybe they're a little burned out, they had a client in the past who damaged a unit or who abandoned a unit mid-lease, or there's some reason why this landlord is just a little bit frustrated with us. We will use a holding fee as a way to save that, to keep a lease from falling through, to make a viable lead actually work. They can also be used often to encourage a first-time landlord. Landlords who have never leased with our programming before, it can be used to make our program seem more appealing, seem like a better option for you, something that you should work with and continue to do moving forward as a thank you and an acknowledgement of you for helping your neighbors and participating in community activities. And then our locators also use these holding fees as a way to build ongoing rapport. I think that's something that isn't really talked about enough when it comes to housing location, is that need to have that rapport between your landlords and your housing locators, that need to have that open dialogue and that communication and a way to make sure concerns are being addressed and a way to make sure that if there's any issues, there's someone around to address those issues. And if you have these positive relationships with, hey, I got $500 from this person, I can call and ask them a question. That's helpful. Though our policy states that these fees can be up to 1 month's rent, in practice, they are more like $250 to $500 just due to the nature of their funding source, right? There's not an unlimited amount of flexible funding, so we try to keep it as low as possible, but they can be more than that if that is deemed necessary, and that has happened before. Not often, but it has. So that is sort of the short spiel of what we do. Again, I'm not the person who actually does it, so I can just tell you sort of policy level what's happening, but I do want to thank all of our locators. They do wonderful, wonderful work. So that's all I have. I don't know who I'm passing it to next.
It is going to be
Our former partner.
Oh, Kendra. I'm gonna send it to Kendra.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kendra Transu. I am the Supervisor of Housing Location at the Bucks County Opportunity Council, and I'm going to be discussing our recruitment bonus, which we actually call a finder's fee. Next slide, Gail. So I am from the Bucks County Opportunity Council. We have a full-blown landlord incentive program, the Bucks Landlord Incentive Program, with the acronym BLIP. No, I did not come up with it. The Bucks County Opportunity Council is a lead partner with the PA 511 COC, the Bucks County Housing Link, and this is a collaboration between the two. Next. Oh, thank you, Gail. The Opportunity Council is the designated community action agency in Bucks County and the lead anti-poverty agency. And our mission is to reduce poverty and partner with our community to promote economic self-sufficiency. And this mission truly overlaps with the Bucks County Housing Link. So in 2018, they came to the Opportunity Council, brought me on. I'm the original locator, and my locators are somewhere in the crowd right now to start this program. Next slide. So why BLIP? What is it? It is our landlord recruitment and retention plan. And we identified there was a huge need to engage landlords at a higher level. Some of the biggest factors are stigma. Bucks County is the third most affluent county in the state of Pennsylvania, and there are a lot of people that hold stigma around homeless families, low income, Section 8 voucher holders, just people with general barriers, you know, not that perfect credit score, criminal background, you know, eviction history, drug and alcohol, mental health, everything. There's stigma around all that. So we needed to kind of open the door for conversation, and unfortunately, the way we do that is with money. We also identified, when I started, I had a lot of landlords that had a lot of past bad experiences and had backed away from the system altogether. And they felt like they were unsupported when a bad situation came up, like damages or, you know, just discrepancies between tenants, unpaid rent. So they were backing away because they didn't have that support. And then the other thing that we came across is there is a lot of people in our county that just aren't aware of what the programs are, what they offer, and what kind of supports are in place, not only for the tenant, but also for the landlord. So kind of our proposed solution over the past 5.5 years, we brought in risk mitigation, incentives, and discretionary funds. Next. Oh, thank you. Okay, BLIP, Bonus for Bucks. So Bonus for Bucks was a landlord challenge that we launched in August of 2021. It was supposed to be like a 1-year pilot. It was very, very successful. So now it has turned into our long-term financial incentive package. In that is the finder's fee, the recruitment bonus, which I'll go into on the next slide. The new landlord bonus, which is for landlords who have not worked with us for 2+ years or have never worked with us. They can receive a bonus equivalent to 1 month's rent, which can also occur on their first 3 units that they rent to us. Then we have a continuity payment, which is for someone who had rented a unit to us and that unit is now vacant. It's almost like a holding fee. We will cover 30 days worth of rent while the landlord is able to get the unit turned over for the next tenant, while we conduct HQS inspections and while we appropriately landlord tenant match for the next person. And then the discretionary payment is one of my favorites. It is very, very flexible. It's a one-time payment that is for a situation that does not fit any of our other incentives, a situation where someone would be willing to take our clients, but then we come forward with a client that may be a sex offender and they're very shaky about that, where we can make a discretionary bonus. They don't qualify as a new landlord or for a continuity payment or anything like that, but because they're willing to take that risk, we can actually just enact a bonus, a one-time bonus for that. And then risk mitigation, we have for protections against damages and loss of rent due to abandonment, eviction, and termination of lease. We are actually currently revamping our risk mitigation at this point. It is to, it will provide an additional security deposit for damages that are beyond the scope of the original security deposit, but we are now opening it up to be a little more flexible, that with proper submissions of damages that exceed that amount, we will entertain paying a higher level on a case-by-case basis. And then next slide. The finder's fee, or the recruitment bonus. I like recruitment bonus more. I'm going to take that back to Bucks and see if we can change that name. The biggest thing about the finder's fee is we're creating realtor relationship, which we found. We partnered for the Bonus for Bucks Landlord Challenge, and we partnered with realtors to actually help us develop these incentives. And our realtor association in Bucks is vast. So a large amount of our community members that don't know about this, we created a relationship with. And I mean, even towards the bottom, it says more program exposure. That gave exposure in itself by partnering with them. We're able to eliminate the middleman, and I don't mean eliminate the realtor, but instead of having to go back and forth with a realtor, educate them on the program, then them educate the landlord on the program, they're educated and they can just refer the landlord directly to us, and we can kind of work out the process from there. It's less work for realtors, more program exposure, and we have found that there are a lot of realtors that are actually landlords themselves. So that's been super beneficial. So the way the payment structure works is if a realtor, or technically it can be a landlord that we currently work with that refers a new landlord. If they refer a new landlord and that new landlord leases up one of the Housing Link tenants, they're eligible for a $2,000 finder's fee. And as it currently sits with the BLIP program, they can receive that fee as many times as they bring us a new landlord. So they can bring me 10 new landlords and they're getting 10 payments for $2,000. So it's a pretty enticing amount of money. So it's been helpful, at least in opening the door and getting realtors more involved with the system and working with, the clientele that have high barriers like we are working with. And then next slide. This is just some of the minimal outcomes. Since risk mitigation was first, it was started in 2019 pre-pandemic. We have actually never drawn any money out of the risk mitigation fund. That is not to say we have not had damages. We've just been able to resolve the matter with other sources. So it's been a really kind of cost-effective program at this point. And risk mitigation was never actually openly advertised to landlords. It was more a tool for the locators to use. So we would use it to tip the canoe in our favor. It is now going to be offered to every single landlord every single time they work with us. Since the start of the program, we have had 8 realtors come forward to bring new landlords. We have obtained 42 new landlords, and after that additional 42 units for the first time they rent to us, we have gotten 17 units off of those landlords as well. And in the past 2 years, just through using the BLIP program, there's been 181 people that got housed with this incentive package in place. So I love this program. We are going to be adding to it coming up here and making it a little more robust. But there is my email if you would like to reach out one-on-one to kind of talk about how we did it, how it's funded. You can jot that down and reach out to me. And I believe I am turning it over to Erin.
Yeah, we have Erin rounding it out as our last presenter.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Kendra. I absolutely love these webinars because I also get a lot of great ideas. I love the finder's fee, and really eager to get back with our landlord engagement group and chat about some of these ideas. So yes, I'm Erin Connolly. I'm the Associate Vice President for Impact at United Way of the Greater Lehigh Valley, and also a member of the Lehigh Valley Regional Homeless Advisory Board. And so the Landlord Engagement Network is really a partnership between a lot of local agencies. I'm going to give some of them a shout out. I know you're on this call. Third Street Alliance, Lehigh Conference of Churches, New Bethany Ministries, Turning Point Catholic Charities, Valley Youth House, and more. And we began this work a number of years back, but it really kicked into high gear after receiving a number of grants. So Home for Good grant, a FAIR grant, and then also a Housing Alliance grant to support this work. And those funds have been ongoing. And really our landlord engagement program has 2 aspects. So one is incentives for landlords to be part of the network. So really trying to build a community around landlords that choose to join the network. They're eligible for $1,000 incentive for the first unit, $500 for the second unit, and then $250 for additional units. And essentially, in becoming part of the network, they agree to give our member agencies right of first refusal. They agree to list their properties or their units on Pad Mission, which is a web-based platform, and also to prioritize families with multiple children as well. So there's the kind of signing bonus element, and then there's also access to mitigation and repair funds. And so landlords have access for up to $2,500, in part for mitigation funds. Similar to Kendra, we really haven't spent much on actual kind of risk reduction, mitigation funds in that way. But also the funding can be used to bring units up to HUD habitability standards. And that's primarily what we've been using kind of that pot of money to do. So say there is a landlord that's part of the network or agrees to be part of the network, and they have a unit, but the floors are not up to standard. So they can use that funding to be reimbursed up to $2,500. The unit gets back on the market. We're able to house a household, and they continue being part of the network. So our landlord engagement committee, again, part of the Lehigh Valley RAB, in addition to administering the program and making sure that the grant funding is being spent fairly, and kind of that oversight group, we also serve as a panel, a mitigation and approval panel. So the requesting agency will work with the landlord in question for, to get access to these repair funds. They provide, vendor information, a copy of the rental agreement, pictures of any damages or pictures of the repairs, and then an invoice for completed repairs. And then so we all work together to approve it. And so there's kind of a group decision-making process, and then the landlord can get reimbursed for those repair funds. So to date, for everything, incentives, and then also the repair funds, that has brought 124 units on board, and that's just the fair funds. There's some others in addition with our additional funds. So we really like doing that kind of group committee approach, and it's been successful, and we're looking forward to, again, gleaning lots of ideas today and keeping it going. What you're seeing on screen right now is just one of our flyers. We've also engaged with our local realtor association. We've done some tabling, and we're really trying to get the word out about the programs. We also, as part of just interacting with landlords and learning more about their needs, one of the needs that they shared was they really wanted some videos that were, how to be a good tenant, things you should think about as a tenant. And so, we are working with a local marketing company to develop these shorts that will share with the landlords and also be able to share out. So that was another, kind of partnership building exercise to be able to say, we're in this together. We want to make this work, and we want to make sure that you also have the tools that you need to be great partners. And with that, I'll turn it back to Gail.
Great, thank you. I think all four of these initiatives are very differently, and even though we ask them to focus on one specific aspect of the incentives that they are offering, the truth is that it takes kind of multiple types of incentives, all kind of on the backbone of really good customer service. I think, to the great point that Michaela meant of just really creating those relationships and establishing that trust with the landlords. So financial incentives are absolutely very important in landlord engagement work, but it really does need to be on a foundation of strong customer service and, making sure that you don't just have a one-size-fits-all approach, that, you can be adaptable to the different needs of different landlords. Landlords can be as diverse as the tenants that they are working with. So with that, that brings us to the end of our presentation piece. As I said, we're not going to be taking question and answer in this webinar format piece. We are going to be going into breakout rooms. So with that, my colleagues are going to be putting into the chat links to 4 different breakout rooms where you can meet with our amazing speakers and ask them questions about their programs and talk through what you are trying to do in your communities. So those links are in the chat, as well as the links have been emailed to you. So we will be spending the remainder of this summit in those breakout rooms. So I want to thank everybody for listening to the presentation, and we are looking forward to hearing your questions and having the conversation in the breakout rooms.